Hi there. I'm going to do a review for Die Hard 2 Die Harder. This movie came out in 1990 and just like the predecessor stars Bruce Willis as John McClane. A little bit different setting with this movie though than the first movie. First movie is basically in the skyscraper. This movie is at the Washington International Airport. Um, this movie is basically polar opposite actually. Basically, what happens is that John is supposed to be waiting for his wife Holly at the airport to pick her up because her flight is coming in, arriving at the Dulles International. So this is supposed to be basically a pickup. He right away runs into trouble, of course, because his car was supposedly in a loading zone, so he gets towed away. So he's stuck at the airport, and he gradually determines that there's a terrorist operation going on in the building. Apparently, Colonel, one of the ex-military, sort of an ex-military, Colonel Stewart, is there to get access to somebody named Esperanza, who's supposed to be like, I don't know, some important dictator in a third world country. I don't know. Doesn't really get into much depth exactly what was the problem there, but nonetheless, there is a platoon of soldiers awaiting the arrival of a certain foreign guy. Basically, the story goes is that they get control of the airport's flight control systems. So basically, the radio, the radar, all that stuff. They have a way to get interact with it. Not entirely clear how they did this, but they did it. And the result is that a whole bunch of people are now, a whole bunch of jets are now sort of stranded up in the air, circling around, waiting for instructions to land. And that's sort of the joke of the movie is that everybody's kind of running out of fuel. Um, and basically, John McClane gradually figures out that indeed Stewart's pile of people is out there to get control, or the terrorist plot is in action in the airport, and that people are going to be in trouble soon. That's I think the biggest problems with this movie is I think it's kind of a curious movie. Basically, as Robert Patrick plays O'Reilly, there's a bunch of ex-military that are all involved in this plot to get the dictator back. More or less, John McClane's got to foil this plot. Of course, basic problems ensue because, of course, the airport security thinks that John is not the guy for the job, and they have figured they can deal with it. Um, some minor subplots, including a reporter named Samantha Coleman, who's there to document everything. Another subplot is a guy that's flying with Holly. Well, not really flying with Holly per se. He's on the same flight. He's within range. He wasn't supposed to be within 50 feet of her, supposedly, so it was actually technically against the law to put him on that flight. But nonetheless, yeah, this is. I don't think there's anything particularly that I don't. I haven't seen this movie very often. For me, he's in Die Hard. Yeah, we have Vengeance. I've seen a lot more. That's the key movies. But this movie here, I don't think people like this movie as much as the other two movies. For some reason, this one doesn't seem as amazing. Nonetheless, the plotting is not that bad. I mean, it's a typical Die Hard movie. It's not really any different than the other two. I think the only difference it has is that because of some of the visuals, it's not quite as good as the other ones. It feels a little bit antiquated and outdated. Nonetheless, it works. Not really much for other than subplotting. There's basic story is that the one general, the colonel, manages to figure out a way to get a hold of get control of airport control systems. So and they make an example of everything by having a plane come in and land, and they put the elevation too high for it, so the guys didn't know to set up their landing gear and actually get the plane ready to land a lot sooner than it would have. Instead, they think they're 200 feet above where they are. or below where they are. So they're not ready. They're not ready for landing. But yeah, it's a problem in the film. Nonetheless, I don't think there's any much inferior to the first film with the skyscraper scenes in the FBI. That stuff requires a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but nonetheless, this movie does not too bad of a job of suspension of disbelief. The only thing is, of course, everybody is already familiar with John McClane's little actions down in Los Angeles, and they don't really, and because of that, they sort of don't really like him that much. They would like him to leave and for them to take care of this problem. Nonetheless, more or less, airport situations require them to eventually start including him in the action sequences and stuff, because of course he's the one who figured out about stuff. One of the problems was is that the security ends up sending their group of so-called anti-terror group directly into a bit of an ambush because they were trying to get this one satellite dish enabled to get contact, I think. And nonetheless, they send people in, but it ends up being an ambush, and a few guys don't really make it out. It knocks out their best men. Altogether, not too bad of a film. I don't know. There's a few things in this movie that are kind of missing. They're not too bad. It's just this. I think the reason why this film is not as well received as the first one is just because of the fact that in the first movie he's in the skyscraper, so there's a limit to what he can do, whereas in this movie they don't have the same limits. Instead, it goes on big trips. Much of the movie takes place in the airport, including the luggage area, and then eventually they take off for the church because the bad guy ends up Stewart ends up taking command, using a church to take command position from that. I don't know how exactly they take command. It's not entirely clear what they were doing, but nonetheless they do it, and it's rather amusing to watch this because I don't think you can actually do that. This is not the era where hijacking airport control systems is quite like it is today, where you can actually use the internet for this kind of stuff. Back then, they weren't all controlled that way, so I kind of find it amusing that they got control. Whatever, it happened. It doesn't really matter. It happened. I think the biggest takeaway of this movie is a bit of a double cross. Don't want to spoil too much, but basically it turns out that some of the military men that got brought in, turns out they're not actually the good. They're not actually there to defend the good guys. They're actually there to sort of get the bad guys out of this, to get a lot of the bad guys more time to do their job. Nonetheless, it's interesting that Bruce Willis ends up in scenarios, including one scenario where he ends up in the plane and he was trying to deal with the dictator, and that ends up not working out in his favor. Nonetheless, it produces one really good visual shot of the plane getting shot up, and then Bruce Willis having to use the ejector seat to get out of the plane. It's an interesting scenes. Again, this movie, I think again, this people don't think I like this movie as much as the other ones. It's just not quite as good. I don't think. I don't know. I don't know. I hadn't seen it in a while, so I knew that it wasn't quite as good. Actually, I don't think it's that bad in comparison to the other Die Hard movies. I think it's right on par with the other Die Hard movies. But nonetheless, yeah, Die Hard. It works well enough to make the cut. It's got some problems, but nonetheless, I think the only thing that's a problem with the movie in my case is that watching them use the church and hooking up all their systems in the airport is almost a little unbelievable. So I'm not sure exactly how they did that. The cables linking everything. I mean, a lot of the airport systems are isolated componentry, so I don't know how they took control so easily, but nonetheless they did. And in the end, Bruce Willis ends up getting them knocked out because, of course, when they get the plane that they need and they go to take off, of course, Bruce Willis buggers up the fuel lines, and so the fuel ends up leaking, and he gets his little Camose by lighting the fire trail, leading to total destruction. But then, nonetheless, this movie, and also a few other things, scenes are a little bit so silly because, of course, you got planes landing in what looks like half a foot of snow, which is not realistic. Planes don't generally land in that much snow, but whatever. Don't think I'm worried about that in the movie where you got a bunch of hijacked security systems in the airport and stuff like that. Nonetheless, produces a pretty good movie, aesthetic. Bad guys aren't too bad in this movie. They're actually fairly good at it. Maybe not as intelligent as the movies, as the first movie or the third movie, but still, almost works. Yeah, Die Hard 2. Yeah, it does. It does have a cameo. Basically, cameos by the cop from the first movie. Oh, what's his name? Original Bill Johnson. Basically, everybody knows. Family Matters knows him. But yeah, it ends up being a pretty good film. Maybe not as good as the other two, but a pretty good film nonetheless. So there's that.